This lesson covers the chapters of 11 and 12 of the book of 2 Kings. In the process of making these videos, 13 and 14 got ahead of 11 and 12. This is backup if you have already looked at 13 and 14. At the beginning of chapter 11, we are in the kingdom of Judah. Verse 1, and when Athaliah, the mother of Ahaziah, saw that her son was dead, she arose and destroyed all the seed royale. This means that Athaliah has killed her own grandchildren. In doing so, she would interfere if she got everyone with the promise to David that his progeny would be seated on the throne. Remember who Athaliah is. Athaliah has married the king of Judah. However, she is from the 10 northern tribes, and her parents are King Ahab and Jezebel. And of course, her mother, Jezebel, would have provided her some wonderful lessons in how to be wicked. 2. But Jehoash, the daughter of King Joram, sister of Ahaziah, took Joash, the son of Ahaziah, and stole him from among the king's sons which were slain, and they hid him, even him and his nurse, in the bedchamber from Athaliah, so that he was not slain. So he's been hidden away. If Athaliah finds out that he's alive, he will be slain. Now, this is his aunt. She is the sister to the king and this little boy's father. He was lying there amongst those who were dead, but somehow they rescued him, and he is being hidden away. 3. And he was with her hid in the house of the Lord 6 years, and Athaliah did reign over the land. So she has taken the crown, not hers to have, and they have hidden this little boy away in the house of the Lord, a place where Athaliah obviously does not visit. 4. And in the 7th year, Jehoash, that was the high priest, sent and fetched the rulers over hundreds and the captains and the guard, and brought them to him into the house of the Lord, and made a covenant with them, and took an oath of them in the house of the Lord, and showed them the king's son. Now, this just mentions the military and the rulers, but we can assume that also the priests, the Levites, would have been there. Interestingly, the woman who hid the little boy, Joash, is the wife of this high priest, Jehoash. 5. And he commanded them, saying, This is the thing that ye shall do. A third part of you that enter in on the Sabbath shall even be keepers of the watch over the king's house. Now that third part, this part that would be entering in on the Sabbath, would have been Levites. The Levites served in courses. Each high priest served or priests that was divided amongst the Levites. They would have served for 2 weeks, twice per year. So this would have been the Levites who were coming in on the Sabbath to begin their service or going out at the completion of their course. And the third part shall be at the gate of Sur, and the third part at the gate behind the guard, so that you keep watch of the house, that it be not broken down. So protecting Joash with 3 separate groups of persons who will stand guard. 7. And 2 parts of all of you that go forth on the Sabbath, even they shall keep the watch of the house of the Lord about the king. So they are, once again, those are the Levites, some of them, who would have been serving in the temple. 8. And you shall compass the king round about, every man with his weapons in hand, and he that cometh within the ranges, let him be slain. And be ye with the king as he goeth and as he cometh in. Day-to-day activity as he cometh in, they are to keep a close watch on this little boy and to keep him from Athaliah, who would definitely put him to death immediately if she found him alive. 9. And the captains over the hundreds did according to all things that Jehoiada the priest commanded. And they took every man, his men that were come in on the Sabbath, and with them that should go out on the Sabbath, and came to Jehoiada the priest. The military, once again, the Levites, who would have been serving 2-week courses, going in and going out on the Sabbath. Sabbath to Sabbath to Sabbath was the time of service. 11. And the guard stood every man with his weapons in his hand, round about the king, from the right corner of the temple to the left corner of the temple, along by the altar. So the temple was completely protected by these armed persons. 12. And he brought forth the king's son, and put the crown upon him, and gave him the testimony, and they made him king and anointed him, and they clapped their hands and said, God save the king. And of course, God Save the King is part of the English national anthem, and it comes from this practice, and it means in Hebrew, let the king live. And the testimony there that they gave him, that would have been, a copy of the law, so that the king was given the testimony at the anointing and crowning and expected to keep the law. But of course, not all of them did. In fact, very few. 13. And when Athaliah heard the noise of the guard and of the people, she came to the people in the temple of the Lord. Not a place she usually frequents. 14. And when she looked, behold, the king stood by a pillar, as the manner was, and the princes and the trumpeters by the king, and all the people of the land rejoiced and blew their trumpets. And Athaliah rent her clothes and cried, Treason, treason. She tore her clothes as a sign of mourning, and distress, and that word treason. Treason in the Hebrew is more closely related to our English word conspiracy. 15. But Jehoiada the priest commanded the captains of the hundreds, the officers of the host, and said unto them, Have her forth without the range. Get her out of these ranks, get her out of the Lord's house. In other words, and him that followeth her kill with the sword. For the priest hath said, Let her not be slain in the house of the Lord. So she is going to be taken out of the temple and killed. And she deserves it because she has committed first-degree murder, and the punishment in the Old Testament is death. 17. And Jehoiada made a covenant between the Lord and the king and the people, that they should be the Lord's people, between the king also and the people. 2 covenants. You will serve the Lord, and there was another covenant between the king and the people. 18. And all the people of the land went into the house of Baal and break it down, and break down his altars and all his images break they in pieces thoroughly, and slew Mattan, the priest of Baal, before the altars. And the priest appointed officers over the house of the Lord. So Baal worship had begun and crept into Judah, and it has been very successfully eliminated under the hand of Jehoiada, the high priest. 19. And he took the rulers over hundreds, and the captains and the guard, and all the people of the land, and they brought down the king from the house of the Lord, and came by the way of the path of the guard to the king's house, and he sat on the throne of the kings. And all the people of the land rejoiced, and the city was in quiet, and they slew Athaliah with the sword beside the king's house. 7 years old was Jehoash when he began to reign. Joash here, notice that there's been a spell change, Jehoash rather than Jehoash, and that you will see that different spelling throughout the book where this person is mentioned. Very common, not only in the Hebrew language, but in English and other languages, that a name can be spelled more than one way. This ends chapter 11. Chapter 12. In the 7th year of Jehoash began to reign, and 40 years reigned he in Jerusalem, and his mother's name was Zibiah of Beersheba. And that name, Zibiah, means whom God, means a roe, like a female deer or a roe. And Jehu means whom God hastens to help. And he did help Jehu, but Jehu didn't always follow through and do the right thing. 2. And Jehoash did that which was right in the sight of the Lord all the days wherein Jehoiada the priest instructed him. That would have been his uncle, his Jehoiada's wife, remember, was his father's sister. So he did well as long as Jehoiada gave him instruction. 3. Now they did a very right thing to throw down the Baal altars. It was not Joash or Jehoash who did that, but Jehoiada, the priest. 3. But the high places were not taken away. The people still sacrificed and burnt incense in the high places. The high places it was illegal worship because it was supposed to have been done in the temple, and they were going up like grove worship, idol worship, even though they may have been offering incense and sacrifices to the Lord. The high places remained. They could never figure out they needed to throw that down. Hezekiah later tried to get rid of the high places unsuccessfully, and it was not until the reign of Josiah that these high grove worship places were finally taken down. 4. And Jehoash said to the priests, all the money of the dedicated things that is brought into the house of the Lord, even the money of every one that passeth the account, the money and all the money that cometh into any man's heart to bring into the house of the Lord. So this would have been the expected contributions, and then that into a man's heart, that would have been offering free will and given, as it was not a part of the command, but a free will offering. 5. Let the priests take it to them, every man of his acquaintance, and let them repair the breaches of the house, wheresoever any breach shall be found. So obviously the temple has fallen into disrepair. It has holes and issues, and the temple itself needs to be repaired. 7. Then King Jehoash called for Jehoiada the priest and the other priests, and said unto them, why repair you not the breaches of the house? Now therefore receive no more money of your acquaintance, but deliver it for the breaches of the house. So the priests are to no longer take the money, and the money is to go into the repair, and he's going to set up a system to ensure that the money is so spent. 9. But Jehoiada the priest took a chest and bored a hole in the lid of it, and set it beside the altar on the right side as one cometh into the house of the Lord, and the priest that kept the door put therein all the money that was brought into the house of the Lord. So the priest who was at the door took the money, and it went into this chest. It was not distributed any other way. 10. And it was so, when they saw that there was much money in the chest, that the king's scribe and the high priest came up, and they put up in bags and told the money that was found in the house of the Lord. So they are counting and weighing this money. Notice that there are 2 witnesses. Most churches today use 2 persons when money is counted and accounted for, and that was done here. The priest and the king's scribe. 11. And they gave the money, being told or counted and weighed, into the hands of them that did the work, that had the oversight of the house of the Lord, and they laid it out to the carpenters and the builders and wrought upon the house of the Lord. So they trusted totally these persons who were working on these breaches in the temple, and money was given directly to them to purchase whatever they needed in supplies and also to pay workers. 12. And to masons and hewers of stone, and to buy timber and hewed stone to repair the breaches of the house of the Lord, and for all that was laid out for the house to repair it. Money, all of the money went into repairing the temple. 13. Howbeit there were not made for the house of the Lord bowls of silver, snuffers, basins, trumpets, any vessels of gold or vessels of silver, of the money that was brought into the house of the Lord. So they did not put any beautiful, precious metal pieces to be used in the worship. They were gone. First, they used the money to restore the structure. None of the money went anywhere but to masonry and carpentry. But they gave, 14, that to the workmen, and repaired therewith the house of the Lord. So the temple was repaired under these workers who were honest and trustworthy with this money. 15. Moreover, they reckoned not with the man into whose hand they delivered the money to be bestowed on workmen, for they dealt faithfully. So they didn't even call them up into be accounting. They were given the money, and they were trustworthy, and they used the money faithfully. 16. The trespass money and sin money was not brought into the house of the Lord. It was the priest. Now, this is a reference to Leviticus chapter 7, sin offering and trespass offering. Those offerings went to the priest, and it did so because it was their provision. It provided their upkeep. 17. Then Hazael, the king of Syria, went up and fought against Gath and took it. And Hazael set his face to go up to Jerusalem. Gath, if you recall, is one of the major cities of the Philistines. And if you can think back to Samuel, Goliath was indeed Gath. 13. And Jehoash, the king of Judah, took all the hallowed things that Jehoshaphat and Jehoram and Athaliah, his fathers, kings of Judah, had dedicated, and his own hallowed things, and all the gold that was found in the treasures of the house of the Lord and in the king's house, and sent it to Hazael, the king of Syria, and he went away from Jerusalem. Okay, Hazael has just extracted some blackmail, and you know how blackmailers work. Here, Jehoash, or Joash, has taken everything, all kinds of the valuable gold and silver, what was in the king's house, whatever he could scare up, and he's given it to Hazael to try to buy peace. Can't be done. 6:19. And the rest of the acts of Joash, or Jehoash, and all that he did, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the Kings of Judah. And yes, they are in chapter 24 of 2nd Chronicles, to be specific. 20. And his servants arose and made a conspiracy, and slew Joash in the house of Milo, which goeth down to Silah. So he has been, we are not given all of the information at this point, but he had, if you would go to 2nd Chronicles 24 and start in at verse 15, you will see that Joash turned evil. 21. For Joachar, the son of Shimeath, and Jehozabad, the son of Shomar, his servants, smote him, and he died, and they buried him with his fathers in the city of David, and Amaziah, his son, reigned in his stead. And Amaziah's name means strength of Yah, or strength of God. We have seen, of course, in those 10 northern tribes that they'd start out good and finish badly, and some of the kings of Judah, just as Joash or Jehoash, whichever we take as the spelling, did really, really well as long as he was under the supervision and watchful eye of Jehoiada. But once Jehoiada was out of the picture, he turned and did evil. And of course, they kept the grove worship for years and years and years. Thank you for watching this video. It is an outreach of the Methodist Church in Essex, Missouri, and the Crossroads Global Methodist Church in Dexter, Missouri.